Today's guest is the phenomenal Jon Herington, a versatile guitarist, singer-songwriter, producer, and a bandleader with a career spanning decades. As the guitarist for the iconic Steely Dan since 1999, Jon's masterful playing has been featured on their albums Everything Must Go and the Grammy-winning Two Against Nature, as well as multiple live and studio DVDs. Beyond Steely Dan, Jon leads the Jon Herington Band and has 8 solo releases, including the critically acclaimed Time on My Hands. He's also toured with legends like Bette Midler. So join us as we dive into Jon's incredible journey through the worlds of jazz, rock, and beyond. Jon, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Great to be here, Abe. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Jon, you've had such a fascinating career, with Steely Dan and working with all these other countless incredible artists. Um, can you take us back to the moment you realized music, and specifically the guitar, was going to be your life's calling? Like, what sort of sparked that passion?
Well, I was passionate about music from the time I was a kid. Listening, I was one of the I was of the generation of guitar players that are budding guitar players that, you know, uh, kind of got their first major inspiration from the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, So, so, and there was music in my family. I had taken some piano lessons and saxophone lessons as a kid. And I was an avid radio listener all my youth, Um, and I guess I was around 13 or something when I really decided to play the guitar. Hadn't done it really before that, and I got into all the music of the British invasion, like Beatles, Stones, Hendrix, Cream and Led Zeppelin, The Who, all that stuff, which I just really fell in love with all that music. And really the sound of the amplified guitar, not just the guitar, so I just played. I taught myself by ear just by dropping the needle on my favorite records, and eventually, all through high school, I had bands of my own. I was writing some tunes, pretty naive lyric writing at that stage, but but I was a kid, and and then I never thought about I never had career aspirations as a guitar player, really. I just played music because I loved it, and I think it was a great distraction and escape from anything troubling that I ever felt. So it was a handy and always available sort of refuge and sanctuary, as well as something that I just absolutely loved. I could really get lost in it,
Yeah,
basically.
sort of a
And
safe space,
yeah,
the guitar.
there are good things about that and bad things. I mean, you can use anything like that defensively, but mostly I would say I used it positively, and it was, a great thing for me. Uh, I still feel like, doing music if you have talent is a valuable pursuit, and as long as you share it, I think it's best if you share it. But when I got to college, I the first day I was there, I met some players who had been disciplined practicers all their youth, and I had not been. I was kind of just interested in sort of learning what made music tick, and I was interested in playing the guitar and performing, but I was not really much of a disciplinarian as far as my practice went, and I couldn't really play very much on the guitar. It was a pretty limited vocabulary, blues, rock, basic stuff. Uh, but then I said, "Oh, this is a big world out here, and if I better get serious about this." And at the time, I played saxophone, piano, and guitar equally poorly. I kind of like to say, and uh, and so I said, "Well, I better pick one and get serious." And so the guitar was the one that was closest to my heart. You could sing when you played it, unlike the saxophone. You could carry it around, unlike the piano, because in those days, I guess they probably had Fender Rhodes pianos, but those were
Was your
impossible to
first
lug.
guitar acoustic or was it electric?
My first, well, there was a guitar in the house that was an acoustic, which was almost impossible to play,
Impossible.
which was my brother's. It was like a silver tone with very high action, and that never called to me. I tried, but because I fell in love with the music of the electric guitar. I mean, all that British invasion stuff was driven by electric guitar and drums, I guess mostly, and bass too, but and songs, great singing and songs, but the no, my real interest was in the electric guitar and an amp, So um, the first guitar I bought was a funny shaped imitation of a Vox guitar. I don't know if you remember those Vox guitars that were sort of geometrically shaped.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This was this was made by a company named Domino. I think maybe it was a Japanese company. It was terrible. It really sounded bad, but I didn't know the difference. And at the time, I just wanted to play, and I could play it. But I got a good guitar not too long after that because I guess it was clear I was going to be spending a lot of time playing it. And so I bought a gold top Les Paul Deluxe for $300,
Oh,
all add.
wow.
This was probably, it might have been 1979 or something like that. Yeah, something around there. So I wish I still had it, but I don't. But it served me very well, and I just couldn't believe how much better it sounded like than the Domino I'd been playing. So anyway, but by the time I got to college, I realized that there were two paths to study the guitar deeply, and one was classical guitar and one was jazz guitar. And jazz guitar just felt closer to the music that I already was interested in. I already played with a pick. I was kind of lame with my fingers. I tried to do a few things, but and I took about a year's worth of classical guitar lessons, but they were sluggish compared to my picking because I'd always been a pick player. And the jazz harmony interested me because I thought it was applicable to the world of music I already was working in and knew. And uh, and so I kind of went off the deep end that way, and I sold my Les Paul, I sold my PA system, and I bought a big archtop Johnny Smith Gibson guitar, FL archtop jazz guitar. And I got serious about studying jazz guitar for probably about 8 or 10 years. And I think I probably didn't bend a string for maybe 6 or 7 years. So I had to relearn that when I got out into the world and tried to work as a player because, I wasn't able to work and support myself just doing jazz gigs. So I had to say, okay, well, I better like buy some solid body guitars again and like get some effects and learn how to bend strings again. I used to know how to do that, so I learned again.
When you started studying jazz, jazz is, harmonically very different than, the British invasion stuff. And, one would say jazz is much more challenging to learn. Did you view it sort of the same way you viewed music in the beginning, or were you like, you know what, this is a totally other thing. I need to really, kind of close the door to other stuff now and just
It
focus on this.
For me, I felt it was definitely a music that required a whole lot more study and discipline before you can even get in the game in a sort of beginner kind of way. Um, and so, yeah, for me, I needed to sort of put the blinders on, ignore a lot of other music, and just focus on this. And of course, there's also a deep and long history of music that, in order to play jazz in any kind of an informed way, you really need to check out, and that's time consuming. You got to do a lot of listening and a lot of transcribing, and there's just so much to learn. That it's interesting that uh, the sort of admission price of like like getting into playing a genre. There are definitely different degrees in different genres. There seem to be different sort of uh, there's more stuff that you have to learn for certain genres, and it's a simpler vocabulary sometimes in other genres. On the other hand, what I've also found, which is kind of interesting to me, um, it's still just as rare to find like really convincing players, even in the genres that are simpler in terms of their materials and their sort of cost of getting in the game in terms of the stuff you have to learn. For instance, in the very simple blues style, um, you know, Albert King has always been my favorite, and really his vocabulary is not very wide. There aren't that many things that he actually plays. You seldom hear him play a chord, and almost everything he plays, you might be able to catalog like the number of basic ideas. It would be a low number, and it's very similar. So there's a lot of repetition. There's a few things that he repeats again and again and again, And I'll be damned if it's so hard to do that as well as he does. In fact, I think he does it better than anybody. And like, so it's not about like the degree of difficulty of a genre. It's about what you do in the genre, and how well you do it. And I think there's some sort of wild, sort of mysterious X factor that some people just have and other people don't. And people may have it in different degrees, but a guy like Albert King has it, like off the charts, and so it's not about like, how complicated the material is, how technically deep it is. I mean, there is a technique to it, but the vocabulary, for instance, like the number of like kinds of phrases that exist in that style is just it's way smaller and kind of easier to sort of at least get in the game and imitate it, than the jazz genre. In
You
the
know,
jazz genre, it's
yeah,
like
and
a whole
sometimes
different
when
thing.
people go to play jazz, their first jazz jam session or something,
Right.
after playing all these other styles, like they can leave the jam session very frustrated and like it's like, whoa, like this is much harder than I thought. Do you remember the first time you like did a jazz session or your first jazz gig, like what it felt like? And you're like, did it?
That's not really, but I do remember my first attempts to sort of try to play any kind of jazz at all really were in a class, because I found at college there I was lucky enough to there was a like a different section of the college that I was able to take some courses in, and Ted Dunbar was a guitar player who was playing and teaching. He was sort of a Wes disciple because he played with his thumb. A very good guitar player. And he had a class called, I don't know, Guitar Workshop, and another one called Jazz Improvisation or something. So I took both of those, and I realized I learned enough so that I mean, I realized that I believed I could learn to do this sometime, but it was unbelievably slow. So I mean, I remember feeling just unbelievably frustrated, like all of a sudden I'm a brand new beginner here, which I was. I mean, in that style, I just didn't know it well enough at that
Yeah, I
point,
think I
and I
think
didn't know the guitar well enough to, so. And I think mostly it's I hadn't listened enough to the music. So I mean, I wasn't walking around like whistling bebop lines in my head. I mean, that takes a while. You have that's not easy. And I didn't grow up on that. So it's an adopted language in a way. My first language is much more, diatonic and much more in one key, and it's much more blues and rock and pop based. But there were, but Stevie Wonder, like, he had tunes that were already using like jazz harmony really, and I was just drawn to that. So that was another thing that attracted me to 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 jazz as opposed to classical guitar, because the classical guitar world is unbelievably like that's a huge high cost of admission there. It's like there's so much you have to do, and it's daunting still to me. I mean, I can't even imagine like the sort of attention to detail that's required, and the discipline of just getting your hands working that way and getting it in tune. I mean, there's so much involved. So that's quite daunting. I mean, there is something more forgiving about the improvising world, because you have to you have to have a little room for forgiveness and acceptance, because you really are trying to make it up as you go along. It's not like
yeah, and
classical
guitarists,
music.
they start with a lot of them start with rock and roll and then switch to jazz, and it's just like they have to unlearn a lot of things and even just unlearn their thinking in a sense, the way
Yeah,
they thought about music.
yeah, it's quite a lot different. I mean, I think that one of the biggest challenges for me, and I think for most people who are coming from a pop or rock or blues world and trying to learn how to play jazz is just negotiating the harmony. I mean, because it's, you know, so much of the jazz standard repertoire is modulating all the time, changing keys. It's not, you can't just sort of say, oh, these five notes sound really great and I'll just keep playing them. I mean, you can't just have that kind of one-dimensional mindset about it. You have to respond to what's happening at the moment, and adjust. It's like, okay, you might be able to, those five notes might be cool for these two bars, but no, not on bar three, because those don't work anymore. So just that kind of harmonic awareness. First, you have to first you have to hear it. Mostly it's listening that people fail to do. They try to start playing before they really have understood the music. And actually it's a lot easier to play once you really know uh, what your intention, what you want to play. It takes a lot less time to get the technique together if you really know what you mean to play before you pick up the guitar. So it's often neglected because it's fun to play the guitar. But I can't tell you how many students are like hunting and pecking to see if they find something that sounds good. I say no. Let's play music head first, not hands first. Let's know what we want to play, and then learn the instrument well enough to play it the first time without hunting and pecking. That's
Yeah.
so I try to make my students do that.
No, that's great. That's and I love the stuff you're saying about like using the brain first. When it comes to improvisation, there's so many ways to talk about it. Like, how do you approach it? Is it more uh emotional, technical, spiritual, a combination of those? Because there is the whole magic of improvising. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a well, that's a little tough, but a lot of it will depend on the context, and for me also a lot depends on how well I know the song, how much I trust the musicians I'm working with, how well I can hear at the moment. There's so many variables that kind of mess with your degree of comfort and being able to sort of get lost and just trust your intuition. But absolutely the most fun way to improvise and what I aim for, although like I said, sometimes circumstances don't allow it, is a kind of intuitive playing and a kind of like maybe my analytical brain is still sort of there in the background, but I like to turn the volume down on the analytical brain and and try to lead with instinct and intuition, because that feels actually a lot of times that's the only way that it feels possible sometimes, because sometimes if you're thinking about it, there's too much to think about. It's a little much, So I mean, of course, if you're just seeing a song for the first time and you're trying to improvise, I mean, sometimes I'm in a situation where somebody puts a chart in front of me and okay, you got to play. So then you're forced to use your analytic mind. It's hard to be just intuitive that way. You could just throw the music away and try to listen, but it's I get closer to decent results if I look at it and then also think about it ahead of time, and then try to use my best judgment to play something that feels good. But really what I prefer is when I know the song well and I'm playing, with people I've played with before and people and good players and tunes I like, that I've explored before. So I already feel like, okay, I know the kinds of things that I like, on this song, and and I've done it enough so that I've discovered enough successful sort of things that I like to play on it that I can sort of afford to just not think too hard about it, just try to free associate, kind of intuitively free associate, like I was singing, just like as if you were improvising, like singing in the shower or something. That's when it feels the best. But that's elusive. It's not always available because like I said, sometimes conditions just don't allow that.
When the
But that's a
music's
beautiful
right in
thing.
front of you. Like
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, sometimes you're being a pro, and you're just using your skills. And that's an admirable thing. I mean, I know people who just sound amazing in that mode even, but there is something that feels different about it. I guess that's what I love about it. Just I'm not always sure it guarantees great results, but the idea of waking up, like all of a sudden coming back to some sort of consciousness where you say, oh yeah, wow, where was I for the last couple of courses? Like you didn't know, like you kind of get lost in it and the music it's playing you. It's that funny feeling of like, um, oneness, like the duality kind of goes away from it. So it kind of leans toward that spiritual thing you're referencing there before. But, I wouldn't call it a spiritual, uh, endeavor really, but I know, but that's a feeling you can sometimes get to, and it really just happens when conditions are right. You know the song well. It sounds good. You could trust the players. You're feeling good. you like your sound, you know. There's a lot of things that can kind of mess you up and distract you and like get you like, oh, well, I wish that amp were better, or oh, I wish that string weren't out of tune. I mean, there's so many distractions, you know. It's kind of amazing. But
What are you kind of exploring now? What's exciting you like now? You know, we just started this new year and anything. So any new ideas or concepts that you're, you know, figuring
well,
out now?
I for the last many years now, most of my sort of day-to-day attention and work musically is geared mostly towards um, jobs that are coming up. You know, I'm usually preparing for gigs in some sort of way, and so right now the next job I have is about a month and a half's worth of touring, mostly in Europe with Madeleine Peyroux. She's a singer I've worked with for many, many years, and there's a new record that was put out, I guess, last June maybe, uh, on which I co-wrote all the songs with her, which is a first for me and for her, and co-produced it with her and Elliot Shiner. And the record's called Let's Walk, and we'll be out promoting that with a small, or the trio actually. It'll be a small group, but one of the challenges of playing all this music on the record on the road with a trio is an arranging challenge. We have to find a way to sort of to make three pieces convincing, you know, playing tunes that were recorded with, you know, drums, keyboards, you know, overdubs like crazy, background vocals, you know, that. So we have limited resources, but I love a challenge like that, and we did it before many years ago. We toured for about 3 years with that same trio, and and I just loved it because, you know, you it's a challenge, and it actually sort of paradoxically allowed us to do a way more diverse bunch of songs than we were able to do with the normal band, which is, you know, Madeleine in front with the guitar, but also piano, bass, drums, and guitar. And there was a sameness about the band, you know, the bigger band, that I don't think we could ever escape. And there was nothing wrong with that. And that's kind of nice. You get a focus and a clarity there of the concept. But the trio was wide open because we couldn't do the same thing all night long and try to just play the way we would normally play with a bigger band. If we did that, it would just be like we'd be putting people to sleep because it would be one dimensional, even just nothing to listen to, no, you know, the same thing all the time. And so we tried all sorts of different things to you know, to sort of spice it up, and we just found ways to play songs that were wildly outside of the normal genre that we would play with the bigger band, and just some sort of fun with just trying different things, you know, just arrangement wise. And what we realized mostly was that you have to trust that uh, that you can go very minimal, because since you don't have since you the biggest you can get is only so big, then like often we would start a song with just a single instrument or something, you know, and wait half the song before the bass even comes in. But when the bass comes in, it's huge, you know. So you just kind of like learn how to play your cards right, you know. And so that's a great challenge. And so I've been talking to Madeleine on the phone and trying to figure out how we're going to approach some of these tunes. And so I'm preparing for that. I've usually got some sort of guitar study stuff that I try to stay in shape. I find it's harder to physically, it's harder to sort of, I don't feel like I'm at my peak, you know, chops wise anymore. I can kind of get close if I really do some regular daily practice. But if I don't, it starts to slip, and I have some sort of injury issues over the years, and so that's challenging. But I still do some of that, and you know, have a most of that is working on. It's mostly a jazz focus, but usually a song specific jazz focus. Like I'll take a particular song and I'll compose something I wish I could improvise, um, and you know, and I, you know, play it long enough so that I hope it gets in there and is new information that might come out, you know, like in that free associative way when I'm playing. Um, so I have a bunch of those, they're almost like eight jazz etudes or something, I
So
would
you'll
say.
write an etude over a set of chord changes for a
Yes.
song and just kind of
Yeah, sure.
work through
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
really
And
cool.
I have a bunch of them that I routinely go to. Also, just for chop's sake, there are a bunch of a handful of little not so little Bach violin pieces that I love to sort of use as warm-ups because um I don't have the patience to play scales and arpeggios and things like that. But that music is so beautiful to hear that I'm motivated to play it. It takes a long time to find fingerings that work, and it's very frustrating. But I've been playing those for years, and they're really great warm-ups because they involve lots of weird string skipping. In a way, the way a violin bow works is similar to a pick. You can play downstrokes and upstrokes only, so bowing and pickings are often in the same world. Of course, the violin is tuned differently, so you can't finger it like a violin
Yeah,
player. You get
practicing scales and all that stuff can be very annoying sometimes.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, some people do it like, watching TV and not really paying attention. I never want to play any guitar without paying full attention to it. That just seems like it's a waste of time. And then like all sorts of habits might develop that you're not really checking out, not really hearing because your attention's elsewhere. I can't do that. I'm not a multitasker. But but I love that. So those are some, not always daily, but when a gig's coming up, I'll try to sort of prepare like that and then try to get in better shape.
yeah, when you're going on the road to do that project, you have such a strong voice as an individual and as a guitar player. How do you, I mean, it must be a real challenge to balance your own voice. Like, how do you look at it when you're going into a project like that? Like, I'm need to find a balance, or I'm just going to be me, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that really depends. I mean, I guess all my playing, I think I'm happy to find that it's all context dependent. I don't sort of show up and with my sort of thing and my bag of tricks and expect to just sort of apply that, regardless of the context. That seems odd, to me. I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. I mean, I when I'm in a musical situation, I'm always like looking for how to answer the question, what does the music need from a guitar? I mean, if I'm playing guitar, like, well, what's the what's the most I can provide to sort of help this big picture work? So I'm always thinking big picture. I'm not so invested in my signature or my own voice or my own sound or anything like that. I mean, my sound is radically different from like on a Madeleine Peyroux gig than it is from what it is on a Steely Dan gig. It's very different. Um, but the Steely Dan gig, because it comes with, so much history in terms of what people get, they know the record so well and they know the sounds of those guitar solos and the notes of the guitar solos, sometimes more than they know better than they know the lyrics.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an unusual thing. I mean, most situations, most playing gigs are not like that, but that one comes with a loaded history that way that I think you have to wrestle with if you're going to play the gig and consider the big picture,
In other words, you're really focused on the music for that particular project, trying to fit in as best you can and service the music is
Always.
what it.
That's always more important. I mean, if I'm doing my own band, that's a different story. If it's a project of my own, then it's supposed to be, the priority is supposed to be on my voice if I'm singing or my guitar playing if I'm playing. I mean, if that's what it's about, then absolutely that gets priority of place that way. I mean, like in Steely Dan, to me, Donald's voice is like the absolute priority. I mean, if you can take everything else away, if you still had that, it would still sound like, okay, that's the essence of Steely Dan right there. You got it. I mean, thankfully we don't need to hear just his voice alone. We can hear the whole thing. But you know what I mean? It's like that's important. And like, I don't know. I mean, people have different approaches, and I have no problem with that, but I don't know how to ignore like, and I think sometimes people do show up and just sort of say, well, I'm just going to do my thing and like see what happens, and that can sometimes give you great interesting results, and surprises. And if you're looking for something different, absolutely, that's one way to get it. But for me, I don't really think I'm looking for something that much different on a Steely Dan gig, and I doubt that most of the audience is looking for something different. They're coming because they know this stuff and they love it. And so, on the other hand, I don't really subscribe to that attitude that you want to like play it note for note like the record, because that feels a little disingenuous too. There's something feels a little off about that. Well, if you're going to do that, then just stay home and listen to the record or something, or buy a nice stereo system.
No, but it's so, in other words, you're a team player, and at the same time, you have this strong voice, but it's, you found the balance, and that's why you get to work as much as you do, and
Well,
it makes
maybe, I
us.
don't know. I certainly have tried to find a balance that way. I mean, for me, I mean, I'm interested in sort of having like this be a vehicle for my own voice, if it can be, but not at the expense of the big picture. That's all. So it is a balancing act, and for me, what that's meant is sometimes kind of honoring what was played on the record, in terms of a rhythm guitar part, or sometimes even like something that may have been improvised, but we've heard it so many times, it sounds like a written melody now. And so if it does sound like, I mean, I can't imagine starting reeling in the years without playing, I mean, I mean, you could, I mean, there's no rule against it. And I don't know that even Donald would complain, but he might.
You're saying like slight embellishment is okay, but stay
Well, I
true.
mean, it's yeah. I mean, to me, I'm just using my own judgment about which sort of stuff is indispensable to the sort of to the to the big picture, and which stuff is. And not all of it is, because some stuff just sort of sticks and like is more, I think it's more what you remember, and it's beautiful, and I don't want to ignore it. And then other stuff, it's less, well, I mean, and something, my taste is involved here too. Sometimes, I mean, okay, well, that's okay, but I don't think that's one of those iconic solos. I think I'm going to be a little freer then. I'm saying, okay, I'm going to just use that one and see what I can do with it. So it's not, I'm not, oh, I'm not, I don't feel like I'm a slave to that, like what's to the precedent of those great records, but they are great records. And so I want to be in the ballpark. And then if there's room for me, great. And over the years I've found a lot of room for me, which has been fantastic. But
John,
it
this has
wasn't
been,
the first year was hard. It was the first year was just I was just trying to sort of stay afloat. That
yeah,
was
yeah.
hard.
No, it's been.
But to get to do it again and again is, that's an opportunity.
No, I
So
love hearing
grateful.
about this. It's been such a, pleasure to hear you talk about this, and it's such a, I really admire it. And I don't know if you remember, my jazz quartet was fortunate to open for you about
Oh
12 years
yes.
ago.
Yes, that's right. You reminded me of that. I had
And
forgotten.
yeah, yeah. So it's nice to come full circle and really hear your take on everything. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. And
It's uh,
and
great to
I
be here, Abe. Thank
yeah,
you.
no, and truly, I mean, you said some things that I think are very beneficial for not just guitar players, but for musicians who are in this business to really think about. So yeah, great stuff. And what's your website, if so everyone knows it, but it's just your.
If you think in threes, you get it right. It's JonHerington.com. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. You can buy the records, the books. I've got books of arrangements for solo guitar, and all the pop rock records that we did. And yeah, lots of info, lots of stuff. So check it out.
Beautiful. Thanks so much.
And thanks, Abe.